joining me again as I read some more from my book, Revelation. When they arrived at the Shaw home, Raphael jumped out of the carriage and banged on the door and called out for Sandra. She opened the door and walked out onto the porch and saw Raphael taking Jeanette out of the carriage. She yelled, "Jeanette, oh my God, what happened?" And he said he found her beside the bridge at the east end of town. And he told her at first he thought it was her. Raphael asked Sandra if he should fetch the doctor. Sandra shook her head no and asked him to please carry her sister into the parlor. When he laid her down on the sofa is when they both saw her neck. Just then Uncle Center came rushing into the parlor and asked if they needed his help. Sandra walked him back to his room and told him that everything was fine and to please go back to bed. Sandra hurried into the kitchen and came back out with a large bowl of water and a hand towel. She dipped it into the water and wrung it out and placed it over the wound on her sister's neck. She then walked Raphael to the door and asked him to please not tell anyone what had happened. He nodded his head and told her good night and left. Jeanette woke up and tried to stand and started shouting, I saw him change into a beast. He was hideous. I killed him. My God, I killed him, Sandra." Jeanette's eyes were filled with tears. "You killed him? Who? Garrison? You killed Garrison? What happened, Jeanette? You must tell me everything that happened." Exhausted, Jeanette began to tell Sandra what had happened, but passed out again. Uncle Center hurried out of his room and stumbled down the hallway, mumbling, "You girls are going to be the death of me. A man can't get any sleep around here with you two carrying around like this." He stepped into the parlor and saw Jeanette crying in Sandra's arms. What in God's name is going on? Sandra stood up and walked over to her uncle and told him that it was girls' things and that he should go back to bed. He looked over Sandra's shoulder at Jeanette crying and then back to Sandra and nodded in agreement. He then turned and left the room. Sandra stepped out of the parlor and watched her uncle down the hallway and into his room and closed the door. Sandra walked back into the parlor and then into the kitchen and fixed her sister a hot cup of tea with a little something to calm her nerves mixed in. She went back into the parlor and sat down next to Jeanette and handed her the cup of tea. Jeanette nodded her head and sipped her tea as her sister told her that she was going to pack them some bags, that she would be right back. Sandra packed 2 bags and she went over the visions she had received from her sister while tending her wound. Sandra carried the bags downstairs and set them down by the front door, and she walked into the parlor and helped Jeanette to her feet. "Where are we going?" Jeanette asked. "Don't ask questions just yet. We must leave this house. I need to get you somewhere safe, and I know just the place." Jeanette nodded her head, and they walked outside. She waited on the porch while Sandra hitched the horse to the buggy. She then helped Jeanette step up into it and then put her bags in the back and climbed over her sister and sat down. She grabbed the reins and yelled, "Yah!" The horses took off so fast that Jeanette almost flew out the back of the buggy. "Sandra, where are you taking me?" Jeanette asked. "To a safe place I have. There is a lot I haven't told you, but now I have no choice. I have a place outside of North Castle in the woods." Still holding the hand towel on her neck, she turned and looked at her sister. "In the woods? Why do you have a place in the woods?" Jeanette asked with a puzzled look on her face. Sandra smiled. "I will tell you everything soon enough." Blackwood Manor. Alexander returned home to meet Garrison's new love. He is excited for his son to have a bride to be with forever, one that loves him. He is greeted by the doorman Dmitri. He asks if his son's guest has arrived. Yes, master, they have retired to the study to wait for your return, he told him. Alexander was looking forward to meeting his son's new mistress. He told Dmitri, "Bring me my crest," a ring Alexander uses to brand the new vampires with the coven's mark. As he entered the study, he announced, "Jeanette, I'm so pleased to meet you." "No, no, my son! What has she done to my son?" Alexander screamed when he saw the silver sword lying in Garrison's ashes on the floor. He called out for Dmitri. Other coven members crowded around the door just outside the study when Dmitri came running into the room. "Where is the woman that was here with Garrison?" Alexander demanded. "I do not know, master. I went outside to feed the hounds when they went into the study. I felt there would be no problems," he replied cowardly. "But there were problems, Dmitri, and you were gone. My only son is dead, murdered. What do you think I should do to you?" he yelled as he raised his hand to strike him. Dmitri held his hands up to defend himself. "No, master. I will find the girl. I will kill her for Garrison. For you, master." Alexander shook his head at the cowardly act. "No, Dmitri, call Anthony," he commanded while using a cloth to pick up the sword from the floor. "I will have Anthony take care of the girl. You will take my son's ashes to the great hall and wait for me there." Alexander knelt on the floor and placed his hand in his son's ashes. Dmitri closed the door to the prying eyes of the coven and picked up a small urn and a hand broom and knelt next to his master and began to sweep his son's ashes into the urn. Alexander Blackwood is of Spanish descent. He stands 6'2" and has jet black hair and brown eyes. His mother was Teresa Blackwood, a nursemaid and secret lover to King Charles II. She became pregnant with Alexander by Charles II just months before he died in November 1st in 1700. During their 5-year love affair, he would give her jewelry and silver coins, as many as she could hide in her bosom. She buried as much money and jewelry as she could throughout the 5 years that she served Charles II. Once he died, she packed up all her belongings and moved to England. So Alexander became very wealthy after his mother passed. He built Blackwood Manor before he became a vampire. His maker was a forsaken vampire that lived in the streets of London. He found her hiding in an old building he had just purchased. He had an entourage of loyal men with him when he was attacked. They chased her outside and she burned to death from the sun. So he did not have a maker to help him through his transition. Once he learned to control his new capabilities, he changed most of his workers and started the largest coven in England. Dmitri left with the urn to summon Anthony. Alexander was devastated by the loss of his son. A tear ran down his face. As he stood up and walked over to a chair near the fireplace and sat down to gather himself, he could never let his coven see him weak. A small group of coven have gathered outside the hall, wondering what was happening. A few minutes later, Anthony rushed past them and entered the study. "Alex, what has happened?" Anthony Lombardi. Anthony Lombardi is of Italian descent, with long black hair and dark brown eyes. He stands around 5'11" and wears only the latest fashions. He is a dark warlock. He was born in 1386. His mother was the daughter of Duke Filippo Francisco. She betrayed her family by marrying an Italian mercenary. His name was Donatello Lombardi. He died not long after Anthony was born. His mother moved back home with her parents in Postidaria, Tuscany. Maria Francisco Lombardi was never really allowed the embellishment she once had. They were treated more like the servants than family. As Anthony grew up, he came to hate those who had more than he was ever allowed. So when he was approached by Domenico Sarto to become a dark warlock, he jumped at the chance to use his newfound powers for his own desires. His master, Domenico, was one of the first dark warlocks made by Satan's demons. Anthony, I need you to find Jeanette Shaw and bring her to me. Waste no time. I want you to bring her here. I want to drain her of every drop of blood. Anthony realizes that Garrison is dead. I'm going to kill someone she loves and make her watch. Then I will torture her and make her beg for her life. Alexander is so full of rage. He has not felt this much rage since his wife was murdered over 20 years ago. It was love at first sight when Alex first laid eyes on Abigail Evans. She was attending the Theatre Royal in London. He watched her as she walked through the lobby. She was wearing a pink silk matuta and petticoat. Half her raven hair was pulled up into a bun and made dozens of light, tight curls. The rest of her long hair hung down over her left shoulder. He could see her sky blue eyes from across the room. Abigail's skin was as smooth as porcelain, and her lips were ruby red. He introduced himself to her, and after a month they were inseparable. He loved her warmth and her compassion, and she loved his humor and sharp mind. And him being a wealthy, respected man in the community didn't hurt. The night that he proposed to her, he told her that he was a vampire. Alexander felt that because she was a human, that she would turn away from him. He was so happy when she told him that her love for him was greater than his affliction. Abigail told him that in her eyes he was perfect just the way he was. They were married after just a few months, and in less than a year she announced that she was pregnant. Alexander was so delighted, but he also worried about Abigail. It was very rare for a human to give birth to a vampire. Almost all women died from just carrying the fetus, and others usually died during childbirth. There had been a handful of live births from the union of a human woman and a vampire. Alexander brought in a specialist to care for her. His name was Nico Crane. He used a special mixture of vampire blood and other nutrients to help her carry the baby to term. When Garrison was born, they fed him a mixture of calf's blood and his mother's milk. It was the perfect nourishment for him. Alexander appointed a vampire, Sonia Carey, to be Garrison's nanny. He told her that if for any reason she had to leave the room with them, to call Warren, the gardener. Under no circumstances was Abigail to ever be left alone with Garrison. As a toddler, he had already killed 3 dogs and 2 cats. The more he grew, the stronger he became. Abigail's health had never fully returned after she gave birth to Garrison. She never understood why the nanny was able to spend more time with him than his own mother. Thank you for listening to this part of my story, and I hope that you will join me